Welcome to the GoGive podcast. My name's Ben Wright, your host, and super excited to have on today Rachel Hutchisson, who is VP at BlackBaud, and I believe your position is Global Social Responsibility. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Awesome. Well, Rachel, thanks so much for having you on. How I like to start these episodes, I obviously know about you and your career, but I'd love for you just to give an introduction about kind of who you are and your role at BlackBaud.
Sure. So I'm Rachel Hutchisson, and I lead global social responsibility at BlackBaud, and we're a technology company that does what we call powering an ecosystem of good. So we provide cloud-based technology that helps different kinds of organizations that are all focused on social good do their work, deliver on their mission. So that's things like nonprofits or charities. We work with about 50,000 of them. We work with funders, so grant-making foundations and how they're granting money out into the world, companies and how they are engaging their employees to be agents of good through volunteerism, matching gifts, et cetera. And then also individuals doing crowd fundraising campaigns. So we're really, as a company, all about the technology that helps good come to life. And in my role, my job is really about making sure that we as a company are an active participant in the ecosystem of good, that we as a company are showing up that way, and that we're helping our people who work with us be agents of good themselves. And so, it's about really believing in and acting on, what we do in the world, the place that we hold in the world.
I love that. Yeah, and kind of digging into some of the stuff at BlackBaud that really is inherent to the company you all up, which I love. I always like to ask this question as well. Obviously, social responsibility is a big passion of mine. I always like to ask the why question. So, is there an event in your life or something that happened that made you get into this field? And if so, kind of what was that?
So I don't think there was a specific event, although there are certain things that happened that kind of helped me on the journey. When I look back, it makes a whole lot of sense. When I was moving forward, I didn't see it. But fundamentally, my parents were always serving and volunteering and doing things like recycling, like, organic gardening, like, so sustainability, was just kind of something I grew up with, like vegetables in the backyard.
Yeah.
Funny sounds, but I actually knew what Swiss chard was when I was a really little kid because we had it in the backyard. So, they were always volunteering. They were serving at, with the public library, with the senior citizen center, with different things and serving on boards. And I knew that they were donors, that they supported different things. And that was just something that was a part of my young life. And so I grew up understanding community without knowing that that's what I was understanding. But then flash forward to when I was coming out of graduate school and looking for a job, and I met the founder of BlackBaud playing soccer. He was an Englishman who was very passionate about soccer, and I met him, and we were talking. He said, "You should apply for a job," and I had no idea that there was really this whole market or marketplace that was centered around nonprofit organizations. And originally BlackBaud only focused on nonprofits. And when they hired me to do market research. And it was very much about, using my skills and research, writing and editing to find things out and communicate them for the company. And it was fascinating to me that it wasn't just this volunteerism my parents were doing. This was a part of a whole piece of the market. Like, I never thought of it that way. And nonprofits employ lots and lots of people, and they contribute a lot to the U.S. economy. And so that was a key thing, because I ended up in a company that was surrounded by, this focus on nonprofits. And frankly, it's just been so interesting to be involved in the evolution of the company from a very small 100-person concern to who we are today as a mid-sized company, and see us do more and more to help expand what we now all call social good, which we didn't call that, back when I walked in the doors of BlackBaud in 1992. So there's been moments, and then of course, opportunity working at BlackBaud, I've just learned so much more, and technology has allowed us to do more.
And that is actually going to be my follow-up, and you kind of alluded to it in your answer there. Obviously, doing my research, I think you're employee about number 100. Is that correct at BlackBaud?
When I walked in the door, I was 130.
Okay.
So now I think I am one of the longest running people, tenured people at the company, because we've had turnover over the past 29 years that I've been there. But there are a handful of us that have been there for around 30 years.
So talk to me a little bit about that journey then, and specifically, you know, the social good function, from when you joined the company to now. There's obviously been some pivotal moments and some changes throughout that time. Are there any kind of moments that stand out through you know, when you joined and kind of your development through the company, but also the function that you now kind of own at the company?
Oh, absolutely. You know, the terminology that we even use today, I've referenced it in terms of social good, shared value, those concepts, those terms weren't even coined yet. So we were founded in 1980, incorporated in 1981, which just celebrated our 40th anniversary. And our founder was very much a philanthropist personally, although he wouldn't have called himself that. So he answered a classified ad in the New York Times for an independent girls' school in New York City looking for technology. And he actually went to the school and coded that system on the actual computer, because personal computers were not necessarily things you just picked up and moved in 1980. And then, you know, he expanded the company from there and started tackling technology for the different offices of the school. And the development office was one of them, which is where the fundraising technology that we created kind of started. So, you know, I've learned, you know, throughout time that things just evolve. So Tony, who was our founder, created certain practices around philanthropy and community. He was very generous, still is very generous. And so he started practices within the company of how we gave to things, how we served. And eventually in the late 90s, we had a private equity investment, and our founder retired. And a couple of years later, we went public. And through that time, we also had acquired a number of other firms who were, this was the DOS technology to Windows technology period. And so we had different companies coming into us, and we were getting bigger, and we had to kind of rationalize, well, what are our programs? We had to do a little bit of care and feeding. And so that's at the point where I kind of stuck up my hand and I said, I would like to lead that. And before that, I was, you know, in this originally 130 person company doing things that were really considered part of marketing, and, you know, leading events and taking on just all sorts of different corporate functions really around our brand. Although we didn't at that point really think much about brand. We were so focused on developing the product and serving the customer. And, you know, when we went public and, you know, we really went through a period of deep discernment about our brand and what it meant and what we wanted it to mean, you know, that's really when I was, you know, taking on first philanthropy and then scaling it to a broader, what we called citizenship model, which is really CSR. And then from there, you know, we've just kind of evolved it over time, expanding and helping our programs mature and making sure that the programs we were offering were things that employees wanted to engage in, that we were looking, you know, over this past year at, you know, our role as a citizen in the world and redefining what disaster meant. We've always made disaster gifts, but disaster in the past did not necessarily equate to pandemic. You know, it was more like, you know, hurricanes or wildfires, racial equity. So now where we sit today is we've, over the past 3 or 4 years, we've been very focused on not just having a really good social responsibility function, but embracing social responsibility across our company. So that's really, it's at the heart of our strategy and who we are. And optionally, releasing data in our social responsibility report about ESG, and really kind of maturing that practice. And that really comes along with the rest of the world and the business market becoming much more focused on purpose, much more focused on sustainability and ESG, and much more focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion. So all of those things are kind of part of this work, and deeply connected to, you don't do it alone. It's this small function in a company that's connected deeply to our people and culture function, or what people might call HR, deeply connected to marketing and communications and the ways we bring our people together. It's connected to our brand. It's all of those things. So it was kind of an evolution of those moments, and the market also evolving to understand over the last 5 years. You know, the business press actually talks about this stuff now. 5 years ago, they didn't. It was just people like me who would talk about it. So So those are some of the moments.
Yeah, and there's a couple of things I want to unpick there, because I think that was fantastic. So the first piece, actually, selfishly, the kind of origin story of BlackBaud, I never knew that, so that was really cool for you to explain. The second part, and I think there's people that listen to this podcast that hold CSR functions for larger companies, and the scenario you just outlined there, whereby one, you had private equity come in, secondly, you acquired smaller companies. Any kind of tips or best practices? Because obviously when you pick up different companies, one of the key challenges is taking those different cultures and making them wonderful, welcome, but kind of all merging them together. So specifically when we talk about the CSR function, any tips on how to do that, how to kind of push that ethos into different or acquired companies?
Yeah, so in our case, we often have been acquiring, excuse me, companies that are, have a shared interest in a market or a market expansion. So they already are working with a market that is like ours or is ours. So they come to us understanding and valuing philanthropy and service. But if they're smaller, which they tended to be, they didn't necessarily have the kind of programming that we had. So often they're gaining, the employees who are joining you are gaining, programs like matching gifts or, volunteer initiatives. And so they're kind of adding to the portfolio of HR benefits. They're getting these other people and community benefits, which is really wonderful. But you do have to, as you talked about, think about culture. And having been at BlackBaud when it was very small, there's something very special about that. And when you have a new group joining you, you have to spend the time to understand what's their culture, what are their practices, how do they get together, how do they give back, how do they serve, and learn that first. And really, I have a checklist I go through of, do you do any of these things? And many times people will say, well, no, we don't, we're not mature enough to do that yet, but we do this or we do that. And then we look at, well, sometimes we say, well, we think it's great you do that, and we should do that too. Let's adopt it as a broader practice. We acquired a company called MicroEdge, and they had a matching gift program, and we didn't have one yet. And that's when we decided we're going to have one across the entire company. So it could add to ours, or it could be that they have a practice that isn't in line with what we do. We don't do fundraising campaigns at work because we work with 50,000 nonprofits and we have 3,100 employees, and we'd all be asking each other for money all the time. When you're in a smaller company, that feels like a really great thing to do. But for us, we have guidelines around how do you do this as a person appropriately, but not spam everybody in your division asking them for money, or ask people who work for you for money. We don't think that we should do that. That kind of mixes with the fact that someone's your boss. And so things that we realized as we got bigger and bigger. So it's kind of I don't want to say a compromise, it's more like a marriage of what do they have that we don't have that could be a gain for us. And often it's more, hey, we're going to bring you into the fold that you actually now have these formalized programs and outlets that you didn't have before. And we actually use our own technology. It's called Csr Connect. On our intranet, every employee can go in and they have their giving dashboard, and they can make gifts, they can track their volunteer hours, they can get engaged. So that, brings everybody wherever they're located, and we have employees all over the place, can be a part of that connected community.
And again, you brought up a really important point, in my opinion, when you say that it's added to HR benefits. And the reason I say that is because I've seen firsthand how, even taking volunteering or the gift matching really does improve employee morale, and is a real benefit for an organization, but also employees. Are you able to talk a little bit about that in your experience, about how the CSR function and allowing employees to have that opportunity to give back to causes they care about? What does that do for an employee base, in your opinion?
I think it's essential. I mean, basically, we're all focused on this in part because we want to do good in the world. We want everybody at the table doing good, but we're also about employee engagement. You want people to have pride in the company where they work. You want them to stay. You want them to care, and service is a way to get to know each other. You want them to really feel like they're a part of this community, and it does lead to longer lasting, employee base that stays with you. So we have always, excuse me, believed in choice. And that's something that sounds simple, but isn't. Many companies say, well, we have these programs, but we have these pillars. We believe in education and heart health and the environment. And so we'll do programs just around those. And if you support those things, we'll match your gifts, et cetera. And we have always felt like, and this kind of goes back to the TEDx talk that I did, that understanding that when people come and work with you, whether they're walking in the door literally or virtually, they are bringing their whole selves with them. And if they're passionate about social good, the form that takes could be different for every person. Someone might care deeply about the environment, and the next person might care deeply about animal welfare. We have a lot of people at BlackBaud who care about animal welfare. So who are we to say you should care about this one thing that the company says is important? And so when you look at our programs that are for our employees, they're very much centered around choice. So we only have one thing that we don't match to, and that's working on behalf of a political campaign. We try really hard not to be political, but you can give to your church or synagogue or mosque, you can give to your community organization, your kids' school, you can give to whatever you care about. It is not for us to say what's right or wrong. And that can be hard because people who are passionate about causes often think that their cause is the right cause and another cause is not. But choice is really important. And I know that our people like it when, we say, hey, you're giving to a disaster. Here's our money. It can help you go further. But who's to say that you should give to this for the disaster? You might give through, like I go to the Episcopal Church, and there's the Episcopal Relief and Development, which works on disasters. I could do that. I could do Red Cross. I could do all sorts of disaster relief. There are all sorts of great groups, and it's up to me to choose.
I love that. I think it's quite a refreshing take on things because, to your point, I think specifically, and one, I suppose to maybe reframe this, great if a company is really passionate about a singular cause, fantastic, right?
But it's great, but portfolio of options. That's the way I think about it. Like, how do you do something that might convene you and build a community togetherness around a cause, but also say, but we also have these things that you get to decide. It's not either or.
Yeah. And one of the, so you mentioned your annual report, and I'll put a link to that in the podcast notes, because that was a really interesting read from some of the data points that you guys pulled out. One of the statistics that I kind of read was around 80% of your employees volunteer, which is incredible to me. That is a really, really high percentage. So is that to do with that kind of ethos of being able to support causes that you care about? Do you think that's what's driving that high number? Because honestly, for a company of your size to have 80% of employees volunteer, that's pretty amazing. So any kind of context around why you think that number's so high? Does it kind of go back to having the choice to support causes you care about?
Yeah, I think that's a piece of it, but I think there's something more fundamental. And that's that, you go back to the fact that we're this shared value company that creates products and services that are meant to be used for good. Mm-hmm. So that is why people want to come and work with us, because of what we do, who we work with, who our customers are, what solutions we offer, what we help these organizations do. So there's a very deep level of meaning in people's jobs, whether you're a programmer or whether you're in finance or whether you're in HR and you're recruiting our next employee. There's this focus on being a part of a community that is about delivering social good. And so when people are attracted to us as an employer, that matters to them. They make that choice that they want to work in a place where there's purpose and it's driven by purpose. And then it's our job when they come in the door to engage them. And we do, have very flexible policies around, having teams get together and volunteer and do this on work time, so that we're not just saying it's great if you volunteer, but you can only do it when you're not working. Because if you're out volunteering and serving, you're actually learning about our customers more. So we encourage it. We want people to do it. We want people to serve on nonprofit boards. We want them to use their skills to give back. And then we do know, because of what we ask in our volunteer survey, that once people are at the company, and they start volunteering, being at the company they show an increase in their volunteerism probably because, and we think because we're giving them opportunities and
Yeah.
we're kind of encouraging them. And it's a great way to develop skills. It's a great way to develop leadership prowess. It's good all around. I think when you volunteer, you actually end up gaining more than you give. But it's something that we deeply value.
Yeah, and I think again the common theme here is really the inherent kind of culture. That's what I keep hearing, right? And it kind of it's all over at BlackBaud, presumably. The other piece that I love from actually your annual report was around you not just reporting financial results and statistics. I wondered if you could dig into that and kind of explain that, because that was one that I loved and really resonated with me. Could you just give the audience some idea of outside of the financial?
Sure. Yeah,
stuff?
so the report is called our Social Responsibility Report, and it's about the company and how we are socially responsible. But the whole focus there is that ESG is about reporting non-financial metrics to the market. It's about going beyond the things that you would report as a public company, your revenue, et cetera, all of that. And so although we include those things in our social responsibility report, it goes beyond that under the E for the environment, S for social, and G for governance, so that there's, sets of things that outside ratings agencies, we're a public company, that investors want to know about. They want to know about our human capital. They want to know about our energy use and our climate footprint. They want to know about our policies, about our board, and so when you start disclosing these non-financial metrics, it gives a broader picture of who you actually are as a company, what's material to you, and what you focus on. And so that's really, we have been reporting over the last couple of years, but this year we added an actual ESG data section with these voluntary disclosures. We formed an ESG steering committee. We have ESG oversight and a board committee now, which shows it's in our strategy as a company. So it shows that we're not just saying it's important, we're making it important.
Yeah.
And then committing to disclosing information and then adding to it in future years.
Yeah. No, that was great. Yeah, I thought that was a really, really cool kind of piece of the report. One question that I love to ask people that appear on this show is there one moment during your time at BlackBaud that's really resonated with you and you thought, this is why I do it. This is why I do the job that I do. And this is kind of something that will kind of stay with me. Is there any moment in your career that you can pinpoint to say, this was something that we accomplished as a company and it was really cool to be part of?
There are many of them, and it's almost hard to pick just one. Probably one of the biggest moments was when we decided to make our first $1 million gift. And given our size and scope, that it was a big decision for us. And it was in 2015, and we pledged $1 million to help build the International African American Museum here in Charleston, South Carolina. And it's being built on the land right where the slave ships docked. And it's really a lost story in South Carolina. And, the amount of people who came through that wharf and who became, contributing members of our society in the US and around North America over the years that followed, but we haven't told their stories. And so we really felt it was important to play a part in retelling history with that investment, which is in here in Charleston, where our world headquarters is, but it's also really for the world. Yeah. So that was a very big moment. But there are other moments that are smaller that are just as big, where you connect someone with an opportunity to serve on a board, and they realize, that there's a community for them outside of work, and they meet different people and they offer their skills, and they get so much meaning from that. You probably followed the Captain Tom campaign last year.
I did. Yeah.
Sir,
yes.
The now former, he passed away last year, but Sir Captain or Captain Sir Tom Moore, I never get it right, walked 1,000 lengths of his garden on his walker to support NHS charities. He used our Just Giving solution to raise that money. And it was incredible. I mean, he raised like $50 million and from 30 countries, millions of people. He really, at a moment when the world was feeling very down, reminded us that generosity was alive and well. And that was so inspiring.
It was.
So there are examples all around me all the time about the goodness of the world and the different forms of generosity that are out there. And I think a lot about how do you continue to urge that along, because we
Yeah.
need it. We need the social safety net that the nonprofit sector provides.
Yeah, and the Captain Tom one was fantastic, and anybody that isn't aware of what we're talking about, I'd kind of urge you to go and look into it, because it really did unite a country, because obviously my family is still back in the UK, and that was one, to your point, a time where people really needed it, did unite the entire country, which is fantastic, right? And
It
kind of
united the world. I mean,
yeah,
literally people from 30 countries gave to this campaign. You know, it was, and a lot of it was very small donations, and he raised about $50 million. It just, his goal was 1,000 pounds.
yeah.
He was going to walk 100 lengths of his garden over the month before he turned.
He was 90.
He turned, I can't even remember. It was,
Yeah.
I can't remember if he was turning 100, something like that. Shame on me for not knowing that, but he was going to walk 100 lengths of his garden before his birthday. And he did it and raised so much more than that. There was an RAF flyover on his birthday. He was knighted. I mean, it was just this moment where it's like, this reminds us that we're all people, that we're all human.
Yep.
And that's really what our business, we think about a lot all the time. Our customers are doing things that are for people and for causes, and they're really deeply about humanity.
Yeah, and that's kind of, I suppose, probably the last topic I just wanted to touch on with you. Watching your TED talk, you used the phrase human social responsibility, which was a new one for me and might be a new one for several of the people listening to this podcast today. I'm just wondering if you can kind of maybe explain what is meant by that expression and how it differs from corporate social responsibility, right? And CSR.
Yeah, so, when you do a TEDx talk, you're supposed to be a little bit provocative. So I was saying the era of CSR is dead, which it's not. But the point that I was making is focusing on corporate was really wrongheaded, that corporate seems impersonal, it seems unemotional. It seems like it's the needs of an entity versus thinking about all the people who make up a company. And so I was trying to reorient people and to be thinking about the people in a company, the humanity in a company, and how we needed everybody at the table to do the good that the world needs. And so it was just more of a reminder in this age of purpose that you shouldn't forget the people and the human component. In fact, you should start there. And I did that talk now, gosh, in 2016. So it was, 5 years ago, and it still very much resonates. And now we're seeing, oh yeah, okay, yeah, we do need to be thinking about the people, and that our talent, the human beings in our organization, are really what make, everything happen. And that's really what the philosophy was.
Love it. Yeah, and I think it's a fantastic expression. Well, one last question, then, kind of before we leave today, and again, appreciate the time. This has been fascinating, and I could honestly go for probably another hour with all the kind of stuff that you've done during your career. One last question for you. So there's still companies and businesses that don't prioritize social responsibility. That it's an area that they either don't prioritize or don't really, I suppose, to use the word fulfill. They have it as a function, but don't actually do much, right? It's just there to kind of tick a box, so to speak. Speaking to people that maybe are in that position, any kind of words for them around why it's important and why you think all companies should have a real focus on this area?
Yeah, I mean, it used to be that it was kind of something undefined, almost like how do you determine that your brand has value? But first and foremost, it's about your people. It's about talent acquisition. It's about finding good people in a competitive market who are going to come and work with you and help make your company thrive or your organization thrive, not just companies. So there's a huge cost to turnover. You really do have to focus on your people, and most leaders get that and understand that, and they can't just pretend that, hey, here's this great story we're selling you so that you'll come and work for the company, and then you come in the doors and it's different. People will just leave. There's a very mobile component of the workforce. So, it's actually living your values in a time when, and it's not just really young people. although the millennial generation and the generations that followed are large and have been pushing this. I'm a Gen Xer. I started seeing a lot of this right after 9/11, people saying, quality of life is important to me. I'm going to make changes. So the workforce in general is looking for something different and for this to be real. The other thing that some people just don't believe is that when you focus on, when you really hone in on your strategies, you can actually do very well as a business by clarifying who you are and what you do. And consumers care. They care about what they purchase and who they work with and what stocks they invest in. And then if you're public, it's going to come at you anyway, because the world and investors are expecting it. So, but it's everybody. It's from your 22-year-old new employee to your investor to your customer. It's all around you.
Love it. Well, Rachel, this has been fantastic. I've thoroughly enjoyed my time with you today. And yeah, I suppose just to leave people with, is there anywhere that they can go to check out the program that you guys have at BlackBaud? Any kind of resources that they should check out? Maybe we just finish with that.
Well, sure. I'd welcome anybody who's interested in learning more about the company to go to our website at www.blackbaud.com. There's the social responsibility report is out there. That's a great way to get a sense of who we are, who we work with, what we do, who our people are, what we care about. It's the most recent asset that we've released on that front. There's a great careers section if you're looking to join a great company. And then I'm very easy to find on Twitter, LinkedIn, etc. I talk a lot about social good out in the world.
Perfect. All right, Rachel, thanks so much for coming on today.
Thanks for having me.